Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We are digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear back from you. Where do we get it right? Where do we get it wrong? You can do that by going to unsilentpodcast.com. You can visit Rumble or other social media channels and participate in the conversation. So, Brian, we're still here. It's a good sign that we haven't emerged into World War III or Civil War 2.0 or
nothing yet.
Nothing just yet. I mean, there's lots of different vectors. We're not to war with Denmark yet, which, we'll see how that turns out,
A little early call that one, I think. But
yeah.
What do you make of all that, Dave? It doesn't feel like just a land grab to me, and it doesn't feel like a resource grab, like where you could make that case for Venezuela and those other places.
Yeah.
Like you could make a case that there is the Greenland thing a legit thing, or is that just a pissing contest? What is this?
Originally I kind of put it in that category with let's make Canada the 51st state kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's like this. Okay, well, it's a Trump thing. He's he got an idea one day and he said, this sounds good. Hey, Greenland, that's kind of cool real estate. There's a lot of it there. Maybe we can build a golf course,
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first. I don't think that anymore. I think it's a real thing and I don't think it's just him wanting Greenland because it's like, walking down, I want that. I want that. I don't think it's that. I think it's, I think there's some, grander, I don't know if you want to say grander strategy, because that doesn't really seem to always apply. But it does feel like that to me, because let's take a look at the strategic situation now. And what he says is on the strategic importance of Greenland is true. It's definitely very true, because the Arctic, it's a lot faster to go through the Arctic with the melting ice and such to get to places than it is to do the normal shipping lanes. So it's super valuable. And the northern part of Greenland is a very valuable place that's been contested for a long time, not because it's, because it's got lots of stuff there. There are a lot of rare earth minerals and other resources that Greenland is rich in that, obviously we're, I think, interested in those things because of our dependence on China. We don't want to be dependent on China so much on that. But the strategic value of it, I think, is very important. Now, it's also, in looking at that a little bit this week, it also seems to me that historically speaking, there's been a number of times we've tried to acquire Greenland. We've tried to either buy it or in some way get control of it. So it's not just an all of a sudden type of thing that Trump wants to do. So there's a variety of factors here that say that it's a serious thing. Now, the part that I don't find serious is we're not going to break up NATO and go to war with Denmark over Greenland. Come on. Yeah. He says the military option is always on the table. Well, that I do take as a Trumpism, as a Trumpian thing.
That's a Trump negotiating tactic. You start with a really horrible thing and hope to meet in the middle on the easier thing.
Right, exactly. We're gonna take over Oslo that's Norway. We're gonna take over all of the windmills and everything no, we just want Greenland, that's all. So I do think that does point to one other thing that I was thinking this week, and that is he knows more in the intelligence establishment, military establishment. They all know more obviously than we do about what's going on. So, and there is a huge amount of investment by China. China has more icebreakers than we do. Did you know that?
I did not.
So yeah, they are building more, and they have more, Arctic resources than you would think, because they're not an Arctic power. They're near the Arctic in the sense that they can go up through the, Aleutians and get to the Arctic. But Russia is the Arctic power. So it seems to me there's some kind of coming I don't know if it's going to be the battle for the Arctic or if it's going to play some hugely strategic role, but it seems to me there must be something like that to do all of this.
Yeah, I think when you look at Greenland in a silo, it's hard to figure out. But more and more, I think it makes sense to take a few things that are happening at once and kind of put them all together and be like, okay,
Yeah,
why are we doing those few things? So one is Greenland, like
yeah,
we're saying, like it's not out of the blue, but it is sudden.
yeah.
We just decided we're going to amp up our military spending by 50%. We're going to spend $1.5 trillion a
I
year
saw that.
on military spending.
Yeah,
And the third thing I would point to, and I'm sure there's many others, but the third thing that stands out to me in the last year is a noticeable change is our Navy has for a number of decades just been kind of the peacekeepers of the sea. We keep the shipping lanes open and things like that.
right.
That posture has changed. They're much more playing offense now than they are playing defense, whether it be in
Absolutely.
the Caribbean or in the South China Sea or whatever. They're being strategically placed to accomplish things, not to defend things.
Right.
So when I put all those three of those things together, it feels like something is happening that none of us know about. And
Yeah.
again, I'm not like tinfoil hat. Like it could just be a change in posture. Like we've decided we're going to do this differently. Okay, fine. I can accept that. Um, but the amping up of military spending 50% and the Greenland thing like becoming an urgent thing
Yeah.
relatively quickly, it kind of smells like there's a reason for all these things happening at once.
That's not tinfoil hat at all, Brian. I think that is the only logical conclusion one must make. And the other thing that you have to figure into that equation is that Trump came into office. Now, look, we're 1 year into the Trump presidency. Can
Yeah.
you believe that? I mean,
It's hard to believe. Yeah.
it feels like we've been
Well, as
at
I get
this.
older, time just goes by fast. Like I have a theory that time goes by fat 50% or 10% faster every year that you age.
Well, I think while I agree with that hypothesis, I also think that just the pace of life in
Yeah.
the pace of insanity, and it's probably a fourth turning thing, has increased a lot in this last year. But just fast forward or rewind back a year and a half, and what did all of the Trump supporters and Trump himself, what were they talking about? Well, we're gonna make America great again. It's America first. We're gonna take care of the homeland. We're not gonna be involved in all these foreign wars. That bad Bush, bad Obama, bad Clinton for doing all these different things in around the world. And now he has this he probably has a belt with notches on it about how many wars he's settled. How many
Yeah.
peace deals he's done. He is nothing but. I mean, that's overstated. He is 90% a foreign policy president, and he's like 10% the rest. Maybe 20%. We got the Minneapolis, we got Doge, we got all that, but it's huge. I mean, the posture difference between Trump, I mean, the bombing of Iran, the fact that what he's saying right now is to the Iranian people, hey, we're coming. You know,
Yeah.
what? What? I
Yeah.
mean, he was the one who was saying
That's similar to the things I was talking about, where it's an offensive posture, not a defensive posture. Now,
totally.
the threat of what do they call it when they financially hurt people, the sanctions, like the
Sanctions, yeah.
sanctions, you could argue, I guess that's an offensive maneuver, but I don't
No,
know. I
not
think
really
it
though.
feels more defensive to me. But
Yeah.
um, the posture in our willingness to do offensive things, not defensive things, is really a shift.
Yes.
And uh kind of not really talking about Taiwan much. 10 years ago,
No.
like if we would have been like, we'll throw down over Taiwan. That's not really a thing anymore.
Yeah.
2 years ago, we'll throw down if it comes to it over Ukraine. That's not really a thing anymore. Like we've kind of ceded those areas, and we're very interested in unifying the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. Well, and now the other thing to throw into there, just to mix it up a little bit, is, and this would have been like news a couple of years ago, but we've been bombing the crap out of ISIS just recently. We've been sending
Interesting.
bombs. Yeah, I mean, so we're
Okay.
we're over there too. We're doing that. We're talking about, and I don't think we're going to have boots on the ground in the Middle East. I don't think we're going to have boots on the ground in Ukraine. I don't think any of that's going to happen. Are we going to have boots on the ground in Greenland? Who knows? I mean, all of these things happening at once. I think it's the safe bet to say that there is some grander strategic military things happening, around the world that we don't really know about. Maybe there's, and this is where you get into speculation and you can get into tinfoil hat stuff. We speculate about, are China and Russia on the verge of such a close alliance that they would be unstoppable? I don't know.
Yeah.
What about, why have we the things that we're talking about, two of the things we're talking about right now are direct threats to China. Taking Venezuela. Venezuela was a massive supplier of oil to China.
Yep. And they had invested who knows how many billions of dollars in ports and bridges and roads and all
huge
kinds
amount
of
of money.
infrastructure. And yeah.
Well, and same thing in Iran, also a huge supplier of oil to China. So
Yeah.
it's maybe there is. I mean, we could go down the maybe route all day long because it may
Yeah.
be that we're so interested in defending Taiwan. Maybe we are. I don't know. I mean, but it may also be that we don't think we can, that the military commanders in the Pacific who have said, we got about a week's worth of munitions to be able to fight this thing. Maybe this is Trump saying, okay, well, we're not going to be able to resist that. We don't want China doing that because of what it means for our economy. Therefore, we're going to cut off their oil supplies and sort of preempt them.
Well, I mean, you can certainly make an argument militarily or just policy wise for, if you don't have to get into a fist fight with your neighbor, if you just find another way to make it too painful to have the conflict,
Yeah.
and a lack of oil would certainly qualify.
Yeah. And the two big suppliers of oil to China have now come under the Trump thumb. So, and I mean, we also hear about this one's an interesting one to me. Cuba. Cuba offers us.
Yeah, I had not heard I had not heard a news outlet name the country of Cuba in, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
Unless they were talking about the anniversary of Fidel Castro dying or something like that.
Right.
It's the only time it ever came up. And now it's in the news like 5 times this week.
Well, and I think, the other thing is they say from a policy perspective that personnel is policy. So who you hire to run these various things, that dictates your policy. So, I mean, Marco Rubio, in my mind, is one of the smartest guys in long time to come to DC. I mean, he's got like 3 jobs now. And so I don't think from a strategic perspective or from a financial perspective, Cuba offers the United States very much. I mean, we could build some really nice resorts there. It's great beachfront property.
Yeah.
So it'd be a wonderful place to make a 51st state or make another territory like, Puerto Rico or something. But Marco Rubio is, of course, Cuban. His family is Cuban, and so he's got a real interest there. So my guess on that,
Cuba feels to me like the thorn in your saddle kind of a thing. Like they're not really a threat. They don't really call it, but it's just that agitation there just all the time. Like here's this little speck of a country. That's land mass and population, like I don't know, 0.5% of what the United States, whatever it is, right? But it's there doing what they want to do 90 miles from your coast.
Right.
It feels like it's more like an eyesore on a painting.
Yeah, I think Cuba's the icing on the cake. I think Rubio probably went to Trump and said, here's how we got to do Venezuela. Here's what makes sense in Venezuela. Here's what makes sense in Iran. Here's what makes sense in these places. By the way, Mr. President, can you throw me a bone here? Can I have Cuba, please? And I'm not saying anything negative about Marco Rubio because I think we should, get rid of that monstrosity of a free the Cuban people. They're driving around cars that the only people that own those same vintage cars here are collectors.
Right.
So, it's a wonderful place. Let's get the cigars.
Yeah. No, something feels like it's afoot. I have no idea what it is, but there's too many big shifts for it to be just a whim. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. But again, I what do I know? I don't know anything about this stuff, so who knows what's going on. On the domestic front, there's some things going on. This is not like necessarily newsworthy, although I think it's interesting. This is from the Associated Press from a couple days ago. A federal judge ruled that the Trump administration cannot block federal money for childcare and other social service funding to the 5 states he wanted to, which presumably included Minnesota with all this,
Right.
fraud going
Fraud.
on.
Yeah.
And so a federal judge said, fraud or no fraud, you got to keep paying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And okay, so again, there's legal loopholes and there could be procedural reasons. There could be a number of things going on, but at the end of the day, what we're saying is the taxpayers have no choice but to keep funding people who are stealing
right.
from you like that.
Yeah.
So either the system is broken or the system is not broken. And if the system's not broken, it's doing, the saying a system, the purpose of a system is what it does.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, this system is not only allowing, it's forcing theft of taxpayers. So
Yeah.
if the system is not broken, that might be a bigger problem if the system is broken. That's my point.
Exactly. Well, and it is all of these things. Whenever any of these things happen like that, well, maybe not whenever, but most of the time when these kinds of things happen, it's on legal loophole basis. So it's like, well, you don't have standing, Mr. President, to do this. It may be that it's a great idea to prevent that 90-year-old woman from getting the crap beat out of her, but you're not authorized to do that.
That's the sheriff's job, not the chief of police for the city of whatever.
Right.
You get into weird things like that. Yeah.
And then that's how this is, but it points to both of those things. I think it points to, again, a lot of times in those binary choices, I pick both. I think the system is broken because it facilitates this kind of garbage, and it's not broken in the sense that people will use the brokenness of the system to just enrich themselves, knowing that the brokenness of the system prevents them from being caught. I mean, why is it that I can't even keep track of how many of these fraudsters they've identified, and how brazen that they are, and how blatant that they are, about taking this money. And it's like, no, we don't take kids, clack, it's like, isn't there any kind of fear of getting, no, there's no fear of getting caught, which means the system is utterly broken and being totally abused.
Or the system is doing what it was designed to do a couple decades ago, and we're just now seeing,
we're realizing
real time.
Yep, exactly.
The thing I found the most interesting about this is, again, AP put this out. AP, I'm guessing, is no fan of Trump.
Right.
So they put the headline out, and again, for those listening, Dave and I are trying to explain what this moment in time is like to people generations from now as they look back and wonder what was wrong with us. I would argue that somewhere between 35 and 40% of the population saw this headline and went, good, they got Trump. He can't do that. Right. That was because, again, we think at 140 character sound bites now. We don't think through details and stuff. That's just what our society has become. Well, we don't think through like the procedural stuff and the standing, all the things we're talking about. It's just like, oh, the judge shut Trump down.
Right.
That's the headline. 35% of maybe 40% of the population is like, that's a victory. Trump got shut down. Another 35 or 40% of the population looked at this and says, why the hell am I paying taxes then?
Yeah, exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you have all the people in the middle, but you have these camps who see the headline. The headline, do I wish there was not fraud on this level? Like, of course. And do I think it's wrong on many levels? Of course. But the fascinating thing about this to me is the reaction from us, the people who read the headline and nothing else. They won't read the story. We won't read the story. None of us. I didn't read the story. None of us are going to read the story.
Yep.
We're not going to think through all the mechanics of how courts work. We're going to either Trump lost, hooray, or why the hell am I paying taxes and nobody cares about me?
Right.
And then there's a small percentage in the middle of those two camps is kind of, in fact, the very first comment on here, I guess we have no choice but to stop paying taxes then.
Yeah, well, and that's where those tipping points come, right? When
Right.
enough people realize that, when the fraudsters think, well, we can squeeze another 2 or 3 years out of this, or another 5 years out of this, and get another 10, 20, $30 million, and then we'll just vanish off into some country where there's no extradition procedures or something like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that people just don't realize when those tipping points happen. I think that fraudsters and the people that depend on the system for their livelihood don't know, and I don't think anybody can predict. I don't think AI is smart enough to predict when those tipping points will actually
No.
come, and that's when things just blow up and get out of hand, and you get
Yeah.
riots and all
As long
that.
as human beings have free will and can do, super smart and super dopey things on a whim,
Right.
I don't think AI can predict any of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I One of the things that I was noticing this week, just I was watching some stuff about the Minneapolis stuff. They were interviewing people like man on the street kind of thing. Like they were at like an ICE protest, I think, or something like that. And
Mhm.
they were interviewing people like they basically. And again, I didn't see the video; they were really long videos or whatever. But I think I can, give you a synopsis. But they're talking to folks in the protests, and they basically said, "Well, don't you have a problem with the fraud? Like it's your money
Right.
also." And they were basically like, it's just, and they didn't even like they didn't give answers because the answers would have been like silly. Either yeah, I
Yeah.
support the fraud, or no, I don't, but I'm protesting the
Right.
people who are like, okay, so it makes total sense that there was not really an answer given. But what struck me was the degree in which they were just like nonchalant about. I don't really care about that. Like
Right.
it's not something I'm worried about. And then the Supreme Court case that's going on with the can biological men be in women's sports,
Right.
and you were talking about this before we fired up
Yeah.
or we hit the record button today. Justice Alito asked the
Right.
lawyering in front of the Supreme Court, well, like what's the difference between a man and a woman and a boy and a girl? And her response was what?
We didn't come prepared to tell the court that. We didn't.
And we don't have a definite we don't
We
have
don't
a
have a
definition for the
definition for the
court.
court.
Yes.
We don't have a definition for the courts.
So anyhow, I'm looking at all these things, and I had kind of an epiphany this week, which was none of the things that we're arguing, like a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, we talked about like what are we really arguing about, and I
Right.
came up with what's fair. Like we're
Yeah.
arguing over what's fair. Yours was um we're arguing over what our version of utopia is, and
Yeah.
two sides of the same coin, basically, I would say,
Sure.
right? But when I think about like goals and objectives, I think you got to have a specific goal and things like that. And I think that's distorted how I view what's going on. And what I kind of came to the conclusion of this week was the outcome is that the people who are saying about the fraud, and the we don't really need a definition of what a man and woman is, even though presumably there's going to be claims in the workplace of women being put in situations that they
Sure.
shouldn't, and like that
Right.
where sex and gender would
Just
theoretically
real.
matter,
Yeah.
right, in
Yeah.
a legal sense.
Yeah.
But we're saying to the Supreme Court, we don't have a definition for you, but we still want you to take our side,
Right.
which so anyhow, all that to say, what's becoming more evident to me, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me that there's not a defined outcome that the people who are currently like more progressive want, other than anything but what we have now.
Right. Right.
Anything that's not the patriarchy, anything that's not white dudes in charge, anything that's not the United States of America as a constitutional republic, like anything that's not that, we're cool with. Like
Right.
whatever it is, we don't care as long as it's not what we have now.
Yeah.
And that helped me simplify things and answer questions that were really not making sense to me. Like how could you not care about fraud? How could you not want a definition of man or woman for cases where women are legitimately hurt in places like locations
Right.
and situations where they shouldn't be? Like
Yeah.
that seems to me like you'd want that stuff, but all that stuff is secondary to we just gotta get rid of whatever we got now. Does that make sense at all?
It totally makes sense. It completely makes sense. And I think it's one, and I think one of the reasons that's ramping up now, I mean, this has been happening for a while, obviously, but it's on steroids right now, right? I mean, it's just higher now than it's ever been. And I think part of it is that the kind of the progressive world had dominated social conversations and societal conversations for a very long time. It was going, it was, advancing, advancing, advancing. Progressive, far left progressive values were advancing. Now, in the past few years, I would say, maybe since Trump 1.0, but even more so in the just recent past, that's the brakes have been put on that, and it's no longer can you say, if you disagree with me, you're a racist. If you disagree with me, you're transphobe, you're a homophobe. You can go down this list of phobes that you could be if you disagree, and so that hijacking of the system to force one point of view is not working anymore. So when that no longer works, then I think what happens, I think the quote unquote logic of it, it's, the explanation for it, not the logic of it, but the explanation for it is, since we can't make the system work, the only choice left to us, since we can't hijack the system and make it do everything we want, the only choice left is to burn the whole thing down, is to destroy the whole thing, and we'll start over with our own system. And so that's why, and in that case, things like fairness and, equity and equality, all of those things no longer matter, because the goal is not a certain outcome. As you say, the goal is to destroy what's now so that we can build a brand new thing in its place that is going to mimic our, and I to me, it's back to utopia. We're going to build a whole new thing. It's going to be our version, and it's going to be, this utopia, and it's going to be wonderful. You'll see.
But it helped me in things. I'll give you a specific example where it helped me kind of understand, I think, at a better level than before. One of the things that, before, like, go back in time 10 days when I'd be like, okay, if you don't want a free market, quote unquote, capitalistic system, which I would argue we have a version of, we don't have a true capitalist. Right. We have Social Security. We have lots of guardrails in place. Okay, so, but fine, we have what we have. If you don't want that, then you want communism, or you want socialism, or you want authoritarianism, or whatever. And the way I've always looked at it was like, well, you can see evidence in other places where that's not been good. Like, you can see how many, what was 100 million people that were killed in the communist takeovers of China and Russia and whatever. And however many millions of people were killed in various other instances of things like that happen. You can see in Latin America, you can see where people got hurt to get these things, and it didn't really work. That you had a smaller pool of even richer people than what we have in the United States right now, right? And I kept struggling, like, why would you aim for that? But now it makes sense. We don't have to have a defined end, as long as we don't have what we have now. Then whatever it is cool, as long as it ain't what we have now.
Right, because
it answers those questions in a way that makes more sense than why would you ignore this obvious evidence where these things haven't worked?
Well, in a lot of the the thinking pattern that you're engaging in there when you ask those questions is part of what they want to tear down, is what they want to destroy, because the thinking pattern is a very Western, Socratic, Aristotelian, it's a very logical if then else scientific method and all that. And, that also explains why for years now we've been told that, like, math is white supremacist, or,
Right. Great example. How could you say teaching math, science, English, and social studies is racist?
Right.
It doesn't matter as long as it tears down what we have.
Because it's a representation of what we want to destroy. And even if it makes sense, even if it's great, it's a representation of what we want to destroy. And so it's getting, but the thing is, though, that will, if you say we want to destroy the system, some people are going to say, they're going to take you your word, and they're going to start working on that. And they're going to start trying to run over ICE agents. They're going to start, doing all sorts of things that we've seen happening.
And there might be consequences for you, the person who's saying that, as a result.
Exactly. And then there might be, what's the match that lights the fire that causes, you do this to us now, well, we're going to come back at you, and you get this escalation. So the only question again was, as we've asked before, is the escalation on the domestic front going to be faster, or is the escalation on the international front going to be faster?
Well, yeah, that is, or are enough people from both currently opposed camps economically put in a new third camp where they unite and have more
Right.
power than the two existing camps. Now, I can see that
Sure.
as an outcome as well,
Yeah.
because the gap between the haves and have-nots is widening. I mean, you can almost feel it by the month. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
it is noticeable
Right.
in a lot of ways that 10 years ago it's like not if it existed then. There's always the haves and have-nots. I don't mean
Sure.
that, but the gap is noticeable, and the minority of people who are the haves is noticeable, and the how things like laws are applied to people. So it's not just financials. My point, like how things
Yeah.
like laws are applied to people, and but it's based on economic and not race and not gender and things like that. So the economic piece could unite. It could pull people from both the progressive and the conservative camps and put them in a new camp
Sure.
where it's the people who are just like the whole system is stacked against us because we're poor, not because we're black men, women, whatever. And I could see a version like that as well.
Oh, I could too. And so here's one of the things, here's one of the consequences for the average Joe, in my opinion. So you've heard of the notion of an Article 5 convention of
Yeah.
so the idea is, look, the system's not working. We're going to take advantage of this Article 5 notion in the Constitution that says we can come together and basically rewrite the whole thing. Now,
Yep.
for most of us, I'm a conservative, and so
What do they call it? It's something of states.
it's conventions of states.
Convention of states. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens is, or what I think is happening is when you start saying to average Joes like me, I would say I'm a pretty, middle of the road kind of guy. I'm a conservative guy, but I'm not radical this or radical that. I mean, I suppose in the new world I am, but for most of my life, it's just an average guy. So when you say to everybody, hey, we just want to tear the whole thing down, then people like me start thinking it's like, well, okay, so what you're proposing is a whole new structure. You're proposing an entire new structure. Well, I have always been interested in preserving the old structure, the old Constitution, and the whole structure of how things were. I have not been in favor. In fact, I remember when those convention states, Article 5, and it was Mark Levin, the radio host, that really started, championing that, I don't know, 15 years ago or whenever it was. And I'm like, oh, just stop that. We're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. But now I look at it and think, well, I guess if the whole system's going to be torn down anyway, maybe we should have a seat at the table and say, well, here's my ideas of a new structure. And it's one also that includes people and ideas that were not previously in my camp. So that's to your point that you were just making about the haves and have-nots and about the obvious inequality and the oligarchy. I was one that was just like, oh, stop talking oligarchy. You're just, grouchy that you're envious. You don't have stuff that you want, but no, there really is this haves and have-not scenario. And I'm willing to consider things now that I wasn't willing to consider before in terms of a new structure. That might not have been the case had the previous structure been something that could have been saved.
Yeah. No, I agree. And for me, the Convention of States was never even on my radar in a meaningful way at all. I mean, I'd heard of it in passing, but I really didn't even understand what it was. Now understanding like the states, their state legislatures vote to go have a convention of states. You got to get the majority of 50 different body or however many bodies of each of the states so in Texas, however many representatives they have in the state legislature, the majority would have to vote to go to this convention of states. And the same in Washington, the same in Arizona, and Hawaii, and presumably many states would say no. But if you got enough of them to say yes, so we're talking, this is going to be a good sized movement. This is not.
It has to be huge. Yes,
this is quite an undertaking.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but when it got on my radar was when I heard somebody interview, I think it was Mitch McConnell when he was the Senate, the top senator.
Yeah.
And they asked him about it, and he just was like, "That's a non-starter. Next question."
Right.
Completely shut it down. And I was like, that's kind of telling. Like, why
Yeah.
is this that is super
He's
telling how
concerned.
he's just so dismissive of that. Like, we're not even gonna give this a breath of air.
Yeah.
And then I started looking into it, not like researching it, but I started
Sure.
paying attention to people. I was like, oh, this is why.
Yeah.
Because it removes all the power from DC. And as you've mentioned several times, the richest zip codes in the country are right around
Right around
DC.
DC. Yeah. Well, and so this is it adds another variable to the mix. And this is when in if it was in the past, it was how do we tweak the system? Are we going to have more, more liberal policies? We're going to be more generous with our tax dollars. We're going to tax people more. Is it going to be less? Are we going to be more individualism and more, what rugged individualism is the thing that people love to hate right now? It's going to be more one of these things. But everybody now is in a position where I think, well, maybe not everybody, but most people, conservative, liberal, whatever, are in a position where they're thinking, well, maybe we need to rethink the whole thing,
Yeah.
and that wasn't the case before.
On a personal level, on that front, I would be willing to sacrifice things now that I would not have been willing to sacrifice a few years ago. And things are on my
Sure.
radar as things that we absolutely must preserve that were not on my radar, let's say 10 or 15 years ago. And
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. The tax code and I'll give you a perfect, clear example, which would like healthcare for all.
Yeah.
10 years ago, 5 years ago, I'd be like, absolutely not.
Right.
I see how the government runs the DMV. I don't want my heart surgery to be running the same way.
Right.
I've shifted on that because of some things.
Sure.
Meaning I'm not like for it, but I'm not as against it, right?
You would consider, right? You'd consider.
I would consider it. And again, I look at how other countries do it, and it's a complete shit show, and I wouldn't want that. But if we could somehow make it better than those things, and everybody can actually go see a doctor when they need to, and get okay, I'd be willing to consider that now.
Sure.
A thing that was not even on my radar as something that was paramount 15 years ago, that today I would absolutely be like, I will not go along with any system that does not hold true to race doesn't matter, and your character and your effort and your ingenuity and talent and
That's
stuff
what
does.
matters.
Because I look at things like the Minneapolis stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If the people who were committing the fraud were from Ireland, let's say,
Right.
it would be handled a completely different way.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see how we can have a melting pot of a country. And by the way, whether we like it or not, we have a melting pot of a country.
Sure.
I don't see how you can have any positive outcome where the race stuff is just it's not a thing. It's not okay to have a hierarchy based on skin color.
Right.
And again, like 15 years ago, I was like, well, of course that's the way it is. It wouldn't even occur to me that would be something you'd have to like defend to the death, but it is now. So I've completely shifted on not shifted on the race thing, but it wasn't seen. I didn't perceive it as a thing we would have to like maybe go to arms to protect. And now it feels like that's kind of on the table,
Yeah, I think there's a number of things like that. And so, and the problem is when you remove the guardrails in general of what you're willing to consider, and see, that's why I brought that up, or why I said that. What are you willing to consider? It's not necessarily what you're willing to do. It's what are you willing to think about? What are you willing to consider? Then now, as soon as you get to that point, we are at that point right now, that means that it will change. It's going to change. Now, that is terrifying, on one side, because I kind of liked, it was never perfect, but, for the most part, the past, 50, 60 years I've been hanging around, it's been, not terrible. And what will the new thing be? What will the new thing turn out to be? Because it's not going to be A wins or B wins. It's going to be, and the fourth turning, when they talk about the next go around, they talk about nobody really wins. It's
everybody wins and everybody loses all at the same time.
All at the same time. So it's an amalgamation of things. So there's going to be stuff like, man, we had a chance to redo it, and this is what we got, and there's going to be other things that like, wow, I never thought we could actually get to this point of this really good thing. So it's going to be, and so we'll end up debating, arguing, pushing, pulling in on topics that maybe we thought were already settled.
Well, when I hear Neil Howe talk about this, the author of the book Fourth Turning, when he talks about this, he talks about these things happen so fast, that there isn't that kind of debate and stuff like you're talking. Like
sure.
We have to make such reactive, immediate emergency urgent decisions and they
it's
have to
true.
be big things. There's not time for debate, but people, they're okay with it because it solves a bigger problem.
Right.
And so even the need for debate goes away on some of these things, which is going to
Yeah.
be super fascinating to watch on these things that we're both sides are dug in on there. You'd be like, everybody's just like, I don't care, do it, and let's move on.
Right.
It's gonna be fascinating to watch that.
It will, and it'll be one of those things where historians will look back and like we look back at things like the Three-Fifths Compromise in history,
Yeah.
where when we look at the people that did that, and we think, what? What kind of dumb thing was that? Well, in those circumstances, where people are where they counted black people as 3/5 of a person,
Yeah.
which to us, from a moral perspective, is just it's horrific. It's just like, what are you even talking about? How can anybody come up with that?
Name did not win through history for sure, but
No.
I would argue that the reason they did it is pretty damn solid.
Well, see, and that's the point, that a lot of these things that happen in the spur of the moment uh, tend to be like uber practical, but then when we sit around 30, 40 years, 50 years, 100 years afterwards in our easy chairs and think, well, what were they even thinking? What was the deliberate? No, to your point, no, there was no deliberation. It's like, and when they were trying to ratify the Constitution, well, how do we get New York on board? Well, how do we really do that? And it's not like, well, what makes sense? What's the highest philosophical principles? It's like, no, Joe over there, he really likes this whiskey. And, so you end up with all these considerations, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Why is bourbon legal in New York, but whiskey's not? Well, the senator at the time, like,
yeah, exactly. You
whatever,
come up with all these types of things that
Yeah.
so it isn't so it is a so I think I guess that then goes to the idea that the people that are the most influential, and this is a dangerous thing, is the people that are loudest and the most persuasive in those moments.
Well, again, that's part I think it'll be fascinating to watch, because I also think that at these times, those loud people who have just been wrong, when the chips are down, people will not trust their judgment in the things that
Sure.
really matter. Now, again, there'll be both. There'll be loud
Yeah.
people who have stupid ideas that get implemented right away because nobody can think of anything else
Right.
better, faster.
Right.
And there'll be the people that we see, the talking heads we see, that you're just like, those people are just full of nonsense. How
Oh,
can
yeah.
they listen
Yeah.
to them? Well, they listen to them because there's no consequences for listening to them. But when the chips are down and it matters, those loud voices all of a sudden might be just ignored, and like they just fade into history.
Yeah.
All that's going to happen probably.
And that's fascinating. That's a fascinating thing to think about, what you just said, because you will probably have a whole series of people that were important and that were articulate and all of this and loud, etc., that are just completely sidelined and don't understand why. And then there'll be a whole bunch of other folks that have some of those same characteristics, perhaps personality characteristics, that rise instantly to the top. And so you end up with a power shift, even a societal power shift, that is quite unexpected. And so we don't really know who's going to be who are going to be the leaders in that. And so it's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, again, it's going to be nothing short of fascinating to watch. That's for sure.
Yep.
One thing I will part with here. This is just kind of a funny headline. Again, file this amongst things that you would never imagine hearing 15 years ago. The UAE, United Arab Emirates. UAE announced it will cut funds for citizens who want to study in the UK.
Yes.
So the United Kingdom.
I heard this.
Out of fear the Emirati students will be radicalized by the Muslim Brotherhood Islamists in British campuses. Like, what?
This is a Monty Python comedy routine from the 80s or something, right? It's like, go to
Twilight Zone or something. Yeah.
What country on earth more than Britain would you say that's not possible? I mean, the prim and proper Brits, and it's like, yes, man.
That's the Brits of 2014. That's not the Brits
not
of 2026.
the Brits of 2026. I mean, no, it's true.
You look at the protests that are happening there now. It's not. There's no powdered wigs in the crowd.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, that's I mean, you've got we could go country by country with things like that. France is another example of,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just bizarre to watch.
Yeah. Just the irony of an Arab country
Yes.
saying we will not fund you to study in Britain,
Because you might be
England,
radicalized by Muslims.
UK, because you might be radicalized by the brother. I, I mean, I don't know what the Kalshi odds were on that
You
18
know,
years ago, but
I don't think the odds were. I don't think that was something you could even bet on at that point, right? Yeah, crazy
anyhow,
times, Brian.
that was my funny headline for the day.
It
I try
is
to find something every week to give us a little bit of humor, and
funny but
that was
true.
my attempt this week. All right, so as Dave said in the beginning, we're talking to future generations, trying to explain what this moment in time is like. If there's anything we said, especially right or wrong in your opinion, we'd love to get your feedback. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. And until next week, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.